Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Smooth Particle Hydrodynamics, my tutorial. In this first episode, I'm going to talk about how Smooth Particle Hydrodynamics is actually working and how we can, what are the steps we need to do to get a working fluid simulation. At first, I'm going to show you the Navier-Stokes equations, what we can learn from them, and how we can implement this method using this equation. And this is it, the Navier-Stokes equation. It describes how basically any fluid moves: water, smoke, honey, all of it. It looks kind of scary, but honestly, it's just Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration, written for a little blur of fluid. And it's only got a few parts, so let's pull them apart first. Let's start on the left. This is the acceleration of our little fluid blob, how fast its velocity is changing. So the capital D just means we measure the change while riding along with the fluid, not from some fixed point or spot. And this is really all we want. If I know the acceleration, I can move the particle. It is really easy, and everything on the right, this will give us the acceleration. Let's take a look at the first piece on the right term, the pressure. Wherever the fluid gets crowded, pressure builds up, and this term pushes it from high pressure towards low. So crowded spots shove themselves apart, and that's what keeps the fluid from just collapsing into itself. Second is the viscosity. This one looks at how a blob is moving compared to its neighbors, or how a particle is moving compared to its neighbor particles, and drags them toward the same speed. It smooths out the differences, basically. Lots of it, you get honey, and just a little bit, you get water. And the third one is gravity. Just a steady pull downward in our case, but it can be any other acceleration. This one, as I said, is already an acceleration. So 9.8 for gravity, for example, and there's no mass involved, which is actually also true for the whole right side, right? Every one of these terms is an acceleration. Sometimes people call all of this forces, but once you have divided it through density, they're all acceleration. And this is the usual way to read that stuff. Sometimes you see that G is any other force. Yeah, in this case, it is like any other acceleration you can have in the simulation. But this is not all, because there is one more equation. This little one says the fluid can't be squished. So whatever flows into a region has to flow back out, so it keeps its volume. That's what incompressible means, and it is what makes water, for example, act like water instead of like a gas. Let me slow down on a couple of these, because the notation sometimes trips people up. The first one, dv over dt, the v is the velocity. So this is how fast the velocity is changing. This is acceleration. So in this example, the dot, this one is moving, and the arrow is its velocity. And you can see that the velocity keeps changing its direction. And a changing velocity is acceleration, or there is a acceleration, which keeps the velocity changing, right? And the capital D just means we measure it while we're riding along with the particle. This is perfect for us because our particles literally do that. And this is one advantage of particle-based fluid simulations. And here is the pressure again. The upside down triangle points toward higher pressure. This is basically a gradient. The minus flips it, so the push runs high to low. Watch the cluster. When the particles pack in tight, pressure fires them back apart. And C, we divide by density. That's what the whole term is turning it into an acceleration. And then we have the viscosity. The triangle squared compares each particle to the average of its neighbors, and this term pulls it toward that average. Look at how the two layers are sliding past each other. Viscosity drags them until they move together. It is just kind of like internal friction inside a fluid. A little side note, we're not directly implementing this operator. This is called the Laplacian. We will use XSPH. This is a little bit different. But you can also try and implement the original one from the paper. And then we have the most easy one, gravity. This is just a push from outside. Usually it's just gravity. It is pulling everything down. Already an acceleration, and we don't need to do anything. Though it could be also a wind, for example, or I don't know, some other kind of acceleration acting from something else than a fluid. And then we have this small rule that the water can't be compressed or shouldn't be compressible, so incompressible. When we squeeze it from the sides, the particles, the little animation, it bulges out the top and the bottom. So it's the same volume, just like a little bit different. It's a different shape. And in practice, we don't enforce this perfectly. We cheat a little bit with a stiff pressure that pushes back hard the moment the fluid starts to compress. But more on that later in this series. Okay, and that's the theory, at least a little bit simplified. Now let's actually build the thing. What you're looking at is a block of fluid at rest, just particles sitting there. And now see that little clump packed together in the middle? That one's is a bit denser than everything around it. And I want you to keep your eye on it because it's going to show us the physics really nicely here. Here's the one thing to hang on to. The whole simulation is just one loop, right? And that loop has 5 steps. Well, it depends also a little bit on the implementation, but generally it's kind of 5 steps. So let's take them one at a time. So step 1, finding the neighbors. Every particle looks around and finds its neighbors, and that just means the ones sitting inside a certain radius, which we typically call h. Let me hover around so you can see it. That circle is the radius, and watch the particles inside. They light up, and the closer they are, the brighter they get. Down at the bottom here, that's the density. Basically how crowded it is right where I am pointing at. And this curve over on the left, that's what we call the kernel. All it really does is decide how much each neighbor counts based on how far away it is. So close ones count a lot and far ones barely count at all. Add up all those weights and there's your density. And that kernel, hold that thought, because it's the very first thing we're going to build in the next episode. Step 2. Now let's run that same density calculation for every particle at once. And I show it to you as a heat map. So blue means sparse, red means crowded. And take a look here. There's our little clump glowing red. So now every particle knows exactly how packed it is. Then let's take a look at step 3. We take that grounding and we will turn it into pressure. And the way we do that is we compare each particle's density to its resting value. That's just the density it's happy sitting at. And if it's more crowded than that, the pressure shoots right up. So our clump is overpacked, which means, you guessed it, it's sitting under a lot of pressure. And step 4. Those pressure differences turn into forces. Each particle gets pushed from high pressure towards low pressure. And look at the clump. Every single arrow is pointing outward away from the crowded ones. That's just the fluid trying to even itself back out. Okay, step 5, we take those forces and actually move the particles. Gravity is turned off for now, so we can watch the pressure on its own. You see the particles from the grounded zone is just shooting out of it because the pressure is just too high. And when I turn gravity back in, same 5 steps as before, nothing new, except now there's a steady pull downward, right? So the fluid falls, piles up at the bottom, and it settles into a pool. And notice how it speeds up on the way down. That's the, well, gravity acceleration, right? And the same thing we were talking about earlier. And yeah, once you add gravity to those 5 steps, you basically got water. Looks a little bit weird, but this is the main part of SPH. And then the last one. Not entirely necessary, but it is kind of a must-have to have a nice looking fluid behavior. And this is viscosity. Same fall as before, but this time the particles drag each other along, so the whole thing moves like one blob or one piece of liquid instead of splashing all over the place like we saw. We can also dial the viscosity a little bit up and down and see how it gets thicker and then thinner. And the colors, by the way, are showing you where viscosity is actually doing its work. Those are the fast shearing parts. And let me just drop a new dam break and we can watch the whole thing with different viscosity levels. I also can just grab a little bit and steer around. And yeah, that is basically the whole thing. Yeah, and this is it for this episode. This is the whole algorithm basically. It is, in fact, pretty easy, but we have to first a little bit understand, or we have to gain a understanding how to interpret those operators, because at the start for me it was really intimidating. I had no idea what it actually was. But actually it is quite easy. And yeah, in the next episode, I'm going to talk about the kernel and the famous Poly6 kernel. And we also implement this as the first piece of code for our SPH simulation. I hope this tutorial was pretty interesting and not that theory heavy. And I hope you understood how this thing actually works. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye bye and have a nice day.